open up the room to questions. So you guys get ready to request a speaker. I'm going to lay some rules out. But before we do that, Miss Denise, I just want to say this has been like, a master class. Truly, your life is fascinating, and we haven't even covered a third of the stories that you have, to share, and you're still living and you're still giving. So thank you. And now, yeah, because this has been a class, I want to introduce you to the rest of your students, and we're going to take questions. So you guys, go ahead and request to speak. We're going to let you all up. Um, just a couple at a time, and we're going to ask you to limit yourself to about 90 seconds, one question or one comment, just so that we can get as many questions and comments in as possible. Don't be shy. But yeah, go ahead and come on up, and we'll get you in here. And Miss Denise, did you want to say anything else before we open up the room?
No, I really would like to hear people's questions.
Great. Okay, so let's go with Jeep. I believe you are able to speak, and you can unmute yourself and go ahead and post your question or your comment.
Thank you. I could spend 90 seconds talking about how wonderful this space is. Thank you so much, you guys. So just a moment. So I was interested in understanding more that the Young Lords and the Black Panther Party were self-identified socialists. And I'm wondering what the difference is between that and what the American Dem Socialist movement today. I think you touched on it before, but I fell off. So if you already addressed it, it's okay. I can listen later.
I hesitate to, even though there was socialist rhetoric, and there's a very big difference between how the Panthers set themselves up and how the Lords set themselves up, and what I call the sort of doctrinaire Communist Party segueing into the socialists, okay, who were primarily white and who privileged class, and a lot of the time did not deal with race at all, or if it was brought up, it was sort of ancillary. And this was a critique that goes all the way back to Du Bois in 1913, I think, was when he critiqued it. I always laugh and say to people, yeah, he stayed in the Communist Party, but where did he go to live at the end of his life? He went to Ghana and was dealing with Pan-Africanism, you know? So I have the CP and a lot of the people who then segued into being democratic socialists at the decline and fall of the CPUSA here, which you are aware of some of the remnants of that in terms of people like Angela Davis, Charlene Mitchell, Deacon Alexander, Kendra, whatever. They formed the Che Lumumba Club out on the West Coast because the Communist Party wasn't dealing correctly with issues of race. So there was an internal struggle, but Panthers and Lords had many different influences. And you had people who were coming from what I call a revolutionary nationalist perspective. There were people who came into the Black Panther Party who came in through the Republic of New Africa or came in through DRUM, the Detroit, the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, and whatever. And so the issue of, and if you look at the Panther initial 10-point program and platform, it does not talk about socialism. It talks about land, bread, housing, healthcare, justice, peace. And though we studied socialism and incorporated parts of that, we also amended a lot of it to come from other perspectives. In the Lords, We were influenced also by the thinking of people from the Nationalist Party in Puerto Rico. So we go all the way back to Betances, Don Pedro Aviso Campos, Mariana Bracetti, and all of these leaders, many of whom were nationalists, others who were independentistas, some were both. And so it's not quite as simple as what I call sort of doctrinaire socialism in the European mode. Okay?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Denise. Carla, we'd had another speaker before you, but I believe they dropped out. So, Carla, you're next. Please go ahead with either your comment or your question.
Yeah, I love this space. I literally told someone earlier that I was like, I'm washing my hair, so I'm literally sitting here with conditioner on my head. That's why I dropped out of the space earlier, and now I'm back in here just listening. But I wanted to say, like, I hold a space on Sundays because I love talking about history. And one of the things that I have always believed is if we don't know our history, we don't know what steps we need to avoid and what steps we can take. We're supposed to learn from the mistakes and the triumphs of the people that came before us. And I really wanted to know, because I love history and I love reading, what book inspired Miss Denise to take the career, the path that she took, that started her on the path that she's on now. Did that make sense?
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's any one book, to be honest. But if I can go all the way back to my childhood, my mom used to read me The Simple Story by Langston Hughes. And that's probably my earliest, and those were like for adults, but my mother always treated me like I was 50 when I was 3, you know, and a sense of regular folks. Langston Hughes had an incredible ability to sort of portray Black working people. And so I was very influenced as a child by Langston Hughes, I'd say. And I mean, later there are other people who came into my brain, but that's the first thing I can remember. Just Be Simple, Langston Hughes.
Great. Krishna, I think you've been having some technical difficulties. We've lost you a few times, but are you there? Can you
Yeah,
hear
I'm
me?
here. I actually dropped off because my phone tends to heat up and kind of drop programs when it gets too hot. So
Gotcha. Well, go ahead with your question though, or your comment.
I had this is kind of a general question for Miss Denise. And believe me, I don't want you to take this as to come across as insulting, but I read this quote from the late cellist Pablo Casals, who was asked why he practices 6 hours a day, and he says because he's still making progress and he's making great, and he's learning a lot. I'm just curious, how do you still learn, every day, because you've been active for pretty much like 50 plus years or so. I'm just curious.
60 plus years.
I'm sorry, 60 plus years. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm 75. I did my first sit-in at age 3.
Work.
My parents, dragged me along to stuff. But it's called listening to people, and never thinking that you got all the answers for stuff. Learning is a lifelong experience. That's why I said to you, I have a wonderful time on Sundays because people come into, we call them diaries. People come into the diary and raise things. And while I'm sitting here talking to folks, I'm going back because I have people who are still commenting. I told them I was going to be away, but they're in there putting in. Somebody just came in and said, oh, there's this incredible group in Turkey that, have modeled themselves on New Orleans Dixieland. And then somebody just came in and said, um, let me give props to Henry Butler, the blind New Orleans pianist. Well, I don't know Henry Butler, but I just went on YouTube and looked him up, and I'm learning. And you have to be open to saying, I don't have all the answers and I don't know everything there is to know. That's impossible. But you have to be willing to be open to learning new stuff. You don't have to love all of it because there's some new stuff I've learned that I don't like. But I'm always going to be open to learn to listen to learn, and to open up lines of communication where it's possible. Now, again, I don't tolerate shit. So people come in and they act out and are disrespectful. I don't have time to be fighting with people for a long period of time. I ultimately just block people because there's too much other stuff on Twitter or wherever that I need to know. I don't have time. I'm nearing the end of my life cycle, so I want more productive things in my life these days. That's it.
That's a very beautiful answer, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Krishna. The Cuban unicorn, are you ready with your question or your comment?
Hi.
Hi,
Yes,
go
I
right ahead.
am. First of all, saludos, Denise. Thank you so much for taking so much time. I think we've all learned so much from you. Like I could listen to you for another 6 hours, because I'm just writing and jotting down notes. But something that you said to me really kind of struck, out of all the many things, struck a chord when you were saying that you were in college, which is now, I believe you said Lehman. And I'm here in New York, and that schools used to be free, universities in the city. And then once they opened up enrollment to Black and Brown students, all of a sudden, we started to see tuition. So I guess where I'm going with this is when you see all of these calls for cancel student debt, um, you know, given how long you've been in the game, what are your thoughts? Because I keep going down the path of this is just going to help white people more, because there's always a way that it helps white people more than the people who really need it. And that's, part of my hesitation with being, about canceling student debt, because I just feel that it's going to cut out Black and Brown students. So I just wanted to hear your perspective on that.
That's a heavy issue. I mean, I have young friends that are carrying, massive debt burdens. And I have mixed feelings about a lot of this because I used to tell my students they wanted to go to grad school. They were I was teaching at SUNY New Paltz. And a lot of them were being subsidized to be there. And they would say, no, but graduate school and whatever. And I'd say, you know what, you qualify for assistance at the City University of New York. And it's far less of a burden to go to, CUNY grad school or go to the University of Albany. But when you start talking about going to Harvard or Yale or whatever, you're going to take it on huge debt. And frankly, I wouldn't give a shit one way or the other about what school. Oh, Harvard, Yale, whatever. You know what? If you can't afford it, and if they're not giving you a full scholarship, don't do it. And they used to look at me like I was crazy. But I don't see. You make a personal choice when you decide to spend $60,000 a year to go to college. And you're buying into a system that is elitist. And I'd rather see free community colleges and free city and state institutions. And then if people want to take on whatever to go to the private schools, that's on them. But I would also like to see that there is more counseling about that. But unfortunately, the private universities are in the business to make money. And so the glamour that surrounds it is a hierarchy that I refuse to recognize. There's nothing wrong with my brains. If I want to speak academies, I can do it. And I've been to 6 different schools. I've experienced many different things. But I think that we have to first move away from. We can deal with figuring out what to do in terms of debt burdens and who takes them on and whatever and how we deal with that. But I think first we need to address buying into a system that is elitist, okay? And demystify that elitism. And, you can go to Cheney or Lincoln or wherever to an HBCU or whatever and get a fine education that's better than. And I was married to somebody who went to Yale and his brother went to Harvard, first husband. And they were no brighter than people I knew that went to city institutions, so don't believe the hype. That's where I come from on this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I thank you for that. We're gonna go to one of our co-hosts who would like to intrude the spaces with a question for you, Miss Denise. Geechee, whose name is Greg. Are you ready, Geechee, with your question?
I am. First
Go
of
right
all,
ahead.
thank you, Miss Denise, for doing this. Renee, you are doing a really, really good job. And I'm even surprised that NChem is doing a good job today. So I am really over the moon right now.
Do you see what I have to put up with, Miss Denise? These people, my co-hosts are.
Hi, Greg. You know I
Hey,
love your name, Geechee,
yes,
because
I
I
do.
love me some Geechees.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Miss Denise, my question is, this is going to be like fanboying, but I spoke to you in a DM group about 4 years ago about how much my paternal grandparents attending West Virginia State for my Nana and Tuskegee for my pop shaped my life. Nakim at that time also talked about how Tuskegee was important for her too. Miss Denise, can you speak about how HBCUs have been important to your life, the connections to them for you and your family, and why HBCUs are important now?
My parents met at West Virginia State, okay? My aunt went to Cheney. My uncle went to Lincoln. My people from their generation went to Tuskegee, went to Fisk. When we left New York during the McCarthy period, my dad's first job was at another HBCU, Maryland State in the Eastern Shore. We then later went and I was 9 when we were at Southern in Baton Rouge. I have other family members. My whole family's academic background comes from historically Black colleges. And I was exposed to brilliant thinkers, teachers, educators, writers, artists, you name it, across the board, and got a fine education. And they got fine educations. And people tend to now want to push that off to the side and aspire to white institutions. And I'm not saying there aren't issues with HBCUs. There are, but they're better. You can deal with them better with your own folks than in an institution that's set up to make you less than. And you can look at it right now with our Supreme Court nominee. And yeah, she was Harvard Law and all of this and whatever. And they are dissing her ass. You know, all that Harvard stuff means nothing to racists. Okay? And they did it with Barack Obama, you know. So I think we need to historically, right out of slavery, my family, my great grandmothers couldn't read or write, but she made sure every one of her children that she birthed, all of them, from poverty in Loudoun County, Virginia, went to college. She said, they may have kept me from reading and writing, but y'all are going to do it. And they waited tables, and they were porters on trains, and they cleaned toilets and did whatever. And Uncle Joe graduated from Howard Medical School in 1906, you know. And Aunt Hannah went to Virginia Union, and Aunt Martha was at DC Teachers. You know, I can go down the list. My grandfather Dennis was at Virginia Union. You know, so I think that we need to sustain and support our institutions because they carried us through. It wasn't just the Black church, you know. It wasn't just Black people organizing like sleeping car porters and whatever. HBCUs are foundational, and I'm not knocking going to other schools. I've gone to other schools, you know, but that's where we need to sustain and support. And unfortunately, there is this attitude that a white institution is better than. Well, that's saying white people are better than, and then not. And that's my opinion, Geechee.
Thank you so much, man. That meant the world to me.
I know it did. You don't have any follow-up questions, Geechee? Or maybe you will later, because I know you have more.
I might later, but I want
buzzing.
everyone to get an opportunity to speak to that brilliance.
Oh, you're so gracious. That's so sweet. He's being sweet, and Kim. I want to take a question from the hashtag from our buddy DA, who is wonderful, and he's been fighting the Twitter streets with us for several years, so he's listening. Shout out to him. But he wanted to say first just a heartfelt thank you to you, Miss Denise, for always being willing to share your story. And then he also wanted to ask, what is one thing that you wish you could tell young activists now that wasn't told to you when you first started doing the work? Uh-oh. Miss Denise, are you still there? Can you hear me?
I'm here. I was trying, my mic wouldn't go on.
Okay. You heard my question though, right?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
That's a hard one. What wasn't told to me? Well, I guess what wasn't told to me, and I bought the illusion just like everybody else. We really thought we were going to make the revolution in 5 years. You know, Gil Scott said the revolution would not be televised; it'll be live. But that didn't happen either. You know, I think that it's very difficult when you're younger to envision what the meaning of long-term struggle is. I think as you get older, you may have a better appreciation of it, but I don't want to give super props to anybody just because they're old. And that kind of feeling that you're not getting anywhere, that things are not happening fast enough, creates a whole set of frustrations. And it can also it can become extreme. For example, some of the people that made a decision to commit revolutionary suicide. Well, guess what? You commit revolutionary suicide, you dead. And then you can't organize shit, And I understood the people that did it, but I didn't agree with them. And as I got older, I realized that, I'm not going to live to see the end of this stuff. I have no desire for what I call microwave revolution. People have instant oatmeal, instant this, instant that, and they want instant change. No, you put your head to the ground, you do your organizing, you put in whatever footwork you can and let the results take care of themselves. You may not live to see them. The whole point is the work. And when I was younger, I didn't see that clearly. And I wish somebody had spent more time saying, listen, long range struggle. And that doesn't mean go slow either. Nina Simone warned people about that, but it means don't let your expectations for change end up becoming self-defeating when it doesn't happen instantly, and then you just throw your hands up in the air and walk away. Okay?
Absolutely, because that seems to be what we're seeing right now. Right now is, this incredible lack of patience and understanding just how long it takes to bring about real change, and that progress is won in inches, and sometimes you take steps back. I was livid a couple of months ago when a month ago when there were certain voting rights groups who did want to meet with the president, for some of those same reasons, and it was frustrating. Now, I think we may have lost Miss Denise again. She's back to listener. I'm not sure if she can hear me, but I'm going to reach out to her, you guys, really quickly just to see what's going on. And Kim and Geechee, if you guys just want to talk a little bit about
Absolutely.
what we've been learning so far. Thank you. Let me check in with her.
Okay. And Kim, I talked about a little bit about HBCUs. You actually
Yep.
attended an HBCU, correct?
Yep. Yes, I went to Tuskegee
And,
University.
and how was that experience there? It's my grandfather's university. I've been there a couple of times. So how was it going to Tuskegee?
It was really interesting. I had just, I was, people don't know a little bit about me. I was like born in Nigeria, raised in the UK, came here for college, and then, ended up being staying here, right? So coming to Tuskegee was coming in directly from Lagos, Nigeria. And I had no idea of what the Black experience was in the US, because I had primarily lived in Lagos, and then before that the UK, which was also kind of like a different environment as well. And so I didn't know what to expect. But one thing that I did find about Tuskegee that was very eye-opening was that Tuskegee allowed me to understand what the Black experience was in the US, which is totally different from the Black experience of someone that lives in Africa or in Nigeria, right? And so it gave me, the opportunity to kind of understand what the experience was and what African Americans actually go through in this country. And I was better able to understand where they're coming from, because, as you know, there's always this struggle between African Americans and Africans, right? And
Absolutely.
and we have this, already predetermined notion about African Americans before we get on the continent and to the US. And so I already had this, expectation of African Americans until I spent, my entire undergrad with them and understanding their struggles and understanding where they're coming from and like walking like a mile in their shoes. And so it gave me a different perspective and a different understanding of what that experience was. And I think it was just enriched my understanding of the whole African American experience. And, and it enriched my life in general. And, I would, having gone back, I don't think I would make any changes. I love going to Tuskegee. I learned a lot there. And, I was able to use that experience to bridge a lot of gaps between not just the African American community at large, but also the gap between them and the African people in general. So that's my experience. So yeah.
So I have another question for you.
Sure.
During this wonderful conversation, Miss Denise, of course, spoke about times that she had in Africa and dealing with people that were in Africa, but she also talked about the Black Panther Party in the UK, and things like members that were part of like the Mangrove Nine, for example. How important is it that we know more about African history, what happened on that continent, about Caribbean history, what happens in the Caribbean, what happens in Brazil, and those Blacks that are in places like France and the UK?
I think it's important because we're all Black people and we're all interconnected in some way, and we're all part of the African diaspora, right? So I think it's important to understand uniquely what every Black population in all these countries, what ties us together, and what their experiences are, because it just enriches us as a population, right? So for me, having spent a lot of time, I've lived in 5 different continents, and it just enriches, your life, right? And so I can speak to Africans about African experience in the UK because I lived in the UK for 5 or 6 years. I can speak about the unique African experience in Africa. I lived in Nigeria. I was born in Nigeria. I can speak to the African experience in the United States because I've lived in America for a majority of my life. I can speak to the African experience in Thailand because I've lived in Thailand for some time as well. And so it's just, I think, just understanding the cultural experiences of every African population as much as you can just enriches you and kind of like sets the bar for understanding and empathy about what they're going through, because it's almost the same in every, just different. It's the same in Thailand. They say same but different. It's the same thing but just different. So yeah, that's my experience.
I am so glad. I never want to lose Miss Denise on the spaces, but I'm so glad for that pause because we rarely hear from Nkem, and now you all get to see why I tolerate her and her her attitude,
Exactly.
because she's so brilliant and she's so lived, and she's quick with her wisdom. She's really short with people actually, but she has lived so greatly. These are the people that I spend time with on this app, and they teach me so much all the time. And so it all goes to this notion and this idea of listening to other people, listening to them, listening to their experiences, because if you really truly want to listen, then you really truly will hear, and then you will understand where people are coming from. And yes, at our base, we are the same. We want the same things. We want to be healthy, we want to be happy, we want to have good lives, we want, we want a lot of the same basic things, and finding that commonality is beautiful. So I am so glad that you got to share that with us, Nkem. And I'm so glad
Thanks.
now people know you smart, so they're gonna be bothering you, and you don't
as
like people
long
bothering you, but I'm glad for
as
it. I'm
long
gonna
as it's
send
not
trolls your
Geechee,
way.
I'm good. As long as it's not Geechee, I'm okay. Everybody but him. Anybody but
I
him.
just
I'm
sent
good.
a nice tweet about you.
Yeah, whatever. All right, guys,
well,
take it
well,
away, Renee.
Miss Denise is back. Thank you. Miss Denise is back with us. So we want to get back to these questions, but I'm really glad that we were able to have that moment. So Miss Denise, welcome back. You can hear me. I just want to make sure you can hear me.
I can hear you, and I am thrilled to hear Kim. Thank you so much, because one of the things that makes me furious is people who don't try to expand their perspectives on things. One, I can't stand people that think that Africa is a country, okay? And it makes me nuts. I mean, and thankfully, I had the opportunity to see that there was a very big difference between Algeria and Mali and Congo and Cabinda and whatever. And if I was younger, I would go back to explore more. But Asia, Latin America, Europe, people have got to expand their consciousness and expose themselves to multiple cultures, because we have so many cultures in the diaspora, and just to say Black is not enough, you know, and to be open. It's why those people who are anti-immigrant or anti-people that have other cultural experiences in the Black diaspora, and they're against them, make me nuts, you know. And I just thank you so much, and I wish that you would sit and be a speaker so that I could sit and ask you a bunch of questions.
I literally, while she was talking and running things off, I'm like, yeah, I'm sure Miss Denise has questions for you, actually. But yeah, she's Kim is fabulous. We are gonna go to our next speaker. It's Shelby. If you're there, if you're ready with your question or your comment, please go right ahead.
Thank you so much. Just first of all, I want to say, thank you for having this space. It's just fascinating. You guys are a wealth of knowledge. But what I want to know is, well, we know that this space is to learn about, people of the community, our community working with certain causes, especially as it relates to human rights, civil rights, various social issues, etc. But Ms. Denise, what I wanted to know is, how does your activism or your movement back in the day differ or even compare to our activism today? I mean, is there something that, the current activists need to adopt from what you guys did back in the day? Is there something that, they should be doing that they're not doing to be more effective? Or is there something that, that maybe they're missing the mark on?
That's hard. It's a good question. I think it's hard to generalize, because there are layers of activism. There are people who come out and they go to demonstrations and they march and whatever, and that's good. I'm not putting that down, because we saw it with, for example, George Floyd, and we saw some of that earlier on with Trayvon Martin. We can go back to Ferguson, and we've seen people. I'm talking about recent kinds of things. So we've seen one layer of activism. I think that I have seen local organizing around political campaigns and things in different parts of our communities across the United States. And I've also seen people who are part of different kinds of groups that are doing things in the community around housing or around food deserts, and or healthcare or whatever. There's a wonderful sister in Mississippi that's doing, Lori Roberts, who's doing stuff for reproductive rights, and and she's handling what has to be done, in her area. What I'm afraid of in some ways is that the day-to-day kinds of work doesn't necessarily happen across the board. It may be happening in individual locations that I don't know stuff about. But I'm not sure that just massive demonstrating is enough, because, as I said, the kind of day-to-day organizing work is not glamorous. It's not fun. You don't get a lot of credit for it. It's grunt work, and but it's necessary. It's foundational. And we cannot always be reacting in outrage. And I worry a little bit about what's going on. And again, I'm not I'm in one place in time. I can only see what people are doing by what they put on social media, and luckily we have social media. I'm not against social media, by the way, because stuff goes down somewhere in, Flint, Michigan, and we hear about it. Back in the old days, we wouldn't have heard shit, you know. Now it's almost instantaneous that we learn about the things that are going on. But I'm hoping that and our old timer organizations are not enough. The NAACP, and you can name other ones too, and I'm not putting them down either. But I think that I'd like to see more people at least talking about what they're doing in their own communities, because essentially politics, it sounds hackneyed, but politics is local. And if you're not organizing people on your block, in your neighborhood, if you're not getting engaged with the school board or the whatever, you're missing out on stuff. That's all that I would say.
Okay, thank you for that. I think the next speaker is Stephen. Stephen, if you're ready, you can go ahead with your comment.
Hi, Ms. Denise. Echoing things everyone else has said, amazing to hear all your stories, and you're always inspiring. And you always say, I'm not so good at this Twitter Spaces stuff, I don't know, but then you roll it off like a master. So I think you've mastered it. My question has already mostly been answered. It's about, what activism today looks like compared to the past, and maybe this is the glorification of history, but looking back, it always has seemed that the Panthers and the Young Lords were so focused, and they had such a clear vision for what they wanted to change, and they did all the things. You're emphasizing the grunt work, but it just seems like they were so focused, and yet there was so much happening. There were schools and the health clinics and testing and this and that. I mean, the feeding children and health and wellness. I mean, it was so organized, and I just don't see that. I just see a lot of splintered egos all over activism. So I'm wondering if you could just reflect on that in addition to what you said about getting local with activism. And thank you again.
Thanks for that question. It may seem that way because it's real easy to point to the good things we did. And we did good things, and we were making shit up as we went along too, because we were young people. We did not have a blueprint. And in fact, we rejected some of the things that we were looking at. But I want to caution, there were also some major errors made. I happen to be comfortable in more military hierarchical kinds of situations, but there are very big dangers to that when two people start power tripping. And I was speaking with a young person in my life who's part of a wonderful group that's feeding people in community gardens and whatever. However, their group is a collective. They spend a whole lot of time talking about no hierarchy. And meanwhile, it takes them forever to make a decision about anything. And I'm coming from my life experience. I would find that totally frustrating because sometimes you just say, you're going to go do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. Because my mother did not collectively sit down and allow all of us to make decisions. My mother would say, no, you're not. I'm sorry. Just listen to me and go do. So I'm comfortable with that. We should be very clear about the pluses to what you see in terms of history. And unfortunately, we don't talk about the mistakes. For example, the Young Lords' biggest mistake, and I talked to this years afterwards with Juan Gonzalez, was to decide to shut down pretty much almost everything that was going on in our base, meaning El Barrio. and the Lower East Side and the Bronx and whatever, and New Haven and New Jersey, and move everybody to Puerto Rico. Disaster. It was essentially the beginning of the end of the Young Lords, because it was a foreign territory, and 2/3 of the Lords didn't speak Spanish. You know, they may have been Puerto Rican, but they were New Yorican or Jersey Ricans or Chica Ricans from Chicago. And you never leave your base behind. You know, you build off of your base, but just up and moving. And it's why I left the Lords. I disagreed with that decision, and I wasn't going to go along with it. And I said, bye, see you. This is a disaster. And I walked across town and joined the Panther Party. But years later, talked about it with Juan, and it was a mistake. We need to also talk about those mistakes so that people, hopefully, though I won't hold my breath, don't make the same mistakes now, you know, to learn from history. You know, what are the errors? It probably was a mistake to pull everybody out of jobs, because it got harder and harder to sustain everybody and support everybody without, you know, grants from foundations. And then later they decided to send everybody to go work, because they went off on a Maoist twinge and pulled everybody out of the community work they were doing and sent them off to go work in the factories, because real people work in factories. You know, I mean, that was totally fucked up too. You can get so caught up in your, you know, progressive politics that you can't see the forest for the trees, you know? So we need to talk about errors that have been made, as well as the glory of stuff. Every generation, every time period has its own stresses and strains and things that have to be confronted. And you can take the good from the past and throw the rest of it out, but you don't know what to throw out if nobody will talk about it, you know. So the Panther Party was not just Huey P. Newton sitting in that peacock chair, you know, looking grand and militant. That's, you know, on a poster somewhere. Real politics is not posters, okay? I don't know whether I answered your question, but that's what I have as an answer.
I think you did very well. And we've been going for over 3 hours, and this has been an amazing conversation. But I just wanted to do a check in with you and make sure that you're good to go a little while longer, Miss
I'm okay.
Denise. All right, cool. Well, you'll let me
I go
know.
to bed at 7:30, so we
Okay.
have time.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, the next person that we have to call up to question or comment is my buddy, Tanya. So, Tanya, please go ahead with your question or your comment if you're ready. Tanya,
I am ready. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Miss Denise, I want to I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. And I'm sorry my little nephew is crying and having a fit in the background. But I am wanting to thank Renee, first of all, for having this spaces. It meant a lot to, I'm sure, a lot of us here today, especially as we are ending what has been a unconventional Black History Month. We've had more things thrown at us than this month than I don't think I ever remember being thrown at us. And I'm so sorry for the crying baby. But, and Miss Denise, I want to thank you, and I am so sorry for this baby. I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and your wealth of knowledge with us today. It has meant so much, and I have been looking forward to this conversation ever since Renee announced it 2 weeks ago, and have been checking in with her, asking her, are you ready? Are you ready? Are you sure? But you have given us a master class in never forgetting where we came from. And I just remember talks with my mom over time growing up here in Mississippi. And Fannie Lou Hamer is one of my favorite civil rights activist. And just to quote her, and this is my last statement and I'm going to hush, is to never forget where we came from and always praise the bridges that carried us over. And I want to thank you for carrying us over this Black History Month. We appreciate you and we love you for everything that you do for us. Thank you.
Thank you. And hugs to your nephew who's fussing.
He is fussing at me because Mickey Mouse is on TV. I muted the TV, so I'm in trouble now.
well,
I'll give
love
him
to the
some
baby.
pizza, Renee.
Right, love to the baby. He is usually adorable whenever we're talking, but yeah, let's get him connected back to his Mickey Mouse. And thank you for that quote. That quote is so beautiful. The bridges, absolutely. And yeah, that was beautiful to share. The next person that we have on our list to speak or comment, to question or comment, is Seba. Seba, are you there? Are you ready?
Yes, I am tech challenged. So can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Oh gosh, I hope I had to leave my apartment because I almost just burned it down. I was listening to Spaces and I had a pot on the fire on the stove, and I think you can probably hear my thing going
We
off.
can.
But
Please be careful.
but I'm good. I'm outside, so if I lose you, that'll be why. Anyway, I'm from Liberia, West Africa, and I'm not too much younger than Miss Denise. I'm 63 years old. I live in Pensacola, Florida, and I wanted to speak to she's answered most of the questions that I had, but I wanted to speak about HBCUs because I came to this country as a 20-year-old from Liberia, West Africa, that was founded by freed slaves from America, and I knew nothing about Black America. I entered Southern University. First day I walked on campus, they couldn't find my kid. And there was this African American professor, Dr. Iris Perkins. I happened to have just settled on her. And she asked me for my name. I told her my name. She began to look for my my kid. She couldn't find it. And she was like, okay, just stand to the side for a minute. We're going to get you straight. And they couldn't find my kid that day. And but she anyway took me under her wings. I'll never forget. She took me under her wings. She made sure that they found my kid and got me registered and everything. Got into school. Liberia had just been embroiled, getting on the way to civil war because we had had a coup that had happened. And so my dad was like, you have to go. I came to the States when I was 16. I went on student exchange, lived with an American family in Arizona, and then when I wanted to go back home. Liberia was like this little paradise. Liberians came to the States and, we had to go back home, so I went back home. And then when the war just started, my dad was like, you have to go. So I came back. My brother was already at Southern University, so enrolled in there, walked on campus that day, met with Dr. Iris Perkins. And after that, she got me enrolled. I remember trying to get me into, I think it was English 201. And the professor was a white professor. And he said, well, she's from Liberia, West Africa. She doesn't have the language skills to be in this class, and wanted me to be assigned to a lower class. And Dr. Perkins was like, no, she speaks perfect English. I can understand her, and look at her transcript. She's going to go into this class. I was enrolled into that class. I ended up scoring the highest. We had to do an essay. I ended up scoring the highest. It was a B minus, but it was the highest in the class. And but I wanted to speak to Black universities, HBCUs, because right after my first semester, my dad has sent me with money. I had no other plans for my brother and myself. We didn't have the ability to work in the country. So Dr. Perkins was a professor in the elementary education department. And she says, come on, I'm going to take you and introduce you to Dr. Martha Oates. She's the chairperson of this department. Dr. Martha Oates, I walked into her office that day. In Baton Rouge, it's not that cold, but I didn't have a sweater. And Dr. Oates says, "Don't you have a coat? Don't you have a sweater?" I was like, "No, ma'am." And she was like, "Come on." And, we hear all these things when you are back home about Americans, about how they don't do anything for you for nothing. If they did something for you, you had to pay them back. Dr. Oates took me to Montgomery Ward, and she said, "Go ahead, find yourself a coat." And I'm standing there going in my head, how does she think I'm going to pay for this coat? I don't have any money. And so she's like, and then she saw my hesitation. She says, it was a burgundy coat. She says, "You like this one?" And I was like hesitant. I was like, "Yeah." She says, "Okay." And we pulled it off the rack. And she marched me up to the counter. She paid for my coat. From that day henceforth, Dr. Martha Oates took me under her wing like I was her own child. And I wanted for nothing. My dad was in the government in Liberia, and he traveled the world. He was the head of the Peace Corps, all of the Peace Corps that went to West Africa. And he was still working with the government at the time. And he had traveled to the Philippines, and he came to the States. And he came to Baton Rouge to see me. And when he came, Dr. Oates said to him, "There are mothers that had kids, and there are mothers who don't." And she says, "You don't have to worry about Kate. She will be taken care of." And between Dr. Oates and Dr. Perkins, I wanted for nothing. All my needs were met. In fact, somehow, I don't know how my tuition got paid, but every day, or I think it was every other day, I went to the elementary education department to work as a student worker. And at the end of the month, I got a check for $271. I don't know what happened. I don't know how she did it, but she did it. I graduated in 1982, and I was going to be done. I wanted to go to law school, but I wouldn't say it because I know if I said it, Dr. Oates would say, "We're going to do it." She ended up sending me to grad school. I got my first degree in journalism. I got my second, my master's in mass communications. And all of it she paid. But while I was at Southern, I learned I learned about American history. Black history. I knew nothing about Langston Hughes when I came here. I knew nothing about Dr. King. I knew nothing about Malcolm X. I knew nothing about James Baldwin. I knew nothing. And at Southern University, I learned all of these things. And so I am so grateful that I was able to go to Southern University because it also prepared me for now here. I live in Pensacola, Florida, and I feel like my vote is wasted. But every election, local election, national election, I work. I go out there and I work each and all of those campaigns. I belong to the Democratic Women's Group down here and try to make a difference. But it almost seems like everything we do on this end is nothing. Then in my real job, I work as a maternal health navigator for one of the biggest hospitals here in town. But I also run a small nonprofit. It's called the Village Hands. And I started that because my husband was sick for 10 years in this town. And people enveloped me and just did stuff for me and my husband and my son. I have one son. He's 24 now. He turned 25 on last Sunday. And they enveloped me and just give us stuff. And then I started working. I lost my job. I used to work at the News Journal writing as the health reporter. We were recruited to come down here, me and my husband. He got sick and he got let go of the job. I was there and then I got laid off. I went back to school because there was nothing else to do. We were going to move back to Maryland, where we first came from, where I met my husband. I remember my little son coming in the room to me and saying, "Mommy, please don't let us move again. I don't want to do this again." So I was like, "Okay, I'll go to Walmart. I'll do whatever." But then I heard about this social work program at the University of West Florida. On the last day, somebody told me about it. I enrolled in there. I went and I got my master's in social work. So now I work as a maternal health navigator here in Pensacola, but I also established that little nonprofit because I saw women that were struggling and just in low-income areas trying to make it and, not getting it through. I began to mentor these women, and I started this little organization. In 2019, y'all can go to the Village Hands on Twitter and follow it if you want and see some of what we're doing out in this community. I talk to these women about empowering themselves to be able to make sure that their kids see them as role models. I talk to them about, like, for instance, about Charles, what's his name? Charles Gaba on Twitter, who is like the healthcare guru. I have DM'd him several times to give me advice on how to talk to my moms about getting health care, about the child tax, dividing child tax, all of those things. So I'm rambling, but when I hear, people say, I read a story today that said Black Africans say they don't want us Africans here because we come to take their opportunities away. No, in my community, I am doing something to empower the African American women that are here. I do that on the daily. I work 5 days a week at my job, and on the weekends, I run the Village Hands. So I think, and Ms. Denise, I think I would like you to speak to this about just people letting other folks come in to divide us. Together, we are stronger. We are stronger. Black Americans, Blacks from the Caribbean, from Jamaica, from Nigeria, from Ghana. We're all one. Black Americans here. We need to work together and not let the outside forces, people want to divide us. You see, do you not think that people, when I was first here, just cutting my teeth on politics, I saw where the folks I used to live in DC. The folks in DC did not want the Jesse Jacksons and the other Black leaders, quote unquote leaders, to mesh with the people in Africa. Do you know how powerful that would be? Do you know how powerful we will be as a people if we join hands together instead of having people come in here and try to separate us? Anyway,
Favor, I
Very
could
good
not
point.
agree with, yes, I could not agree with you more, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to host the spaces with Miss Denise, because so many of these conversations have been taking place on Twitter, and they have been very infuriating, and so we wanted to bring positivity and realism to that conversation. But thank you so much for your gift. I'm not sure what you were cooking, but blessings to your meal and your food, honey. I'm all about food and food healing. So we're gonna wish you the best with that.
Unless
And
it's from
thank you.
Keisha Lance Bottom.
Well, hey, and thank you for the work that you are doing, and in the
Follow
area
her
that you're
on
doing.
Twitter.
What
I
you want?
I follow her on Twitter, and I am so glad, sister. We have connections you don't even know about. But Southern as your start here, and my middle name is Roberts, Denise Roberts Oliver. Hello. And the airport in Liberia, in Monrovia, is Roberts Field. And my ancestors were some of the founders of Liberia. And we don't get taught, just like you didn't get taught our history here, we don't get taught the history of Liberia or Sierra Leone or Mali or Ghana or Kenya or Mauritania or whatever. We have got to learn more, be open to more, and bless you, sister.
Absolutely. That was beautiful. Was there more wisdom for sure from our elders, and there's a lot of people that want to speak, so we're gonna keep moving forward, and try to get in as many more questions as possible with the time that we have left. I did want to share a question from the hashtag. Our good sis, Miss Tiffany, we call her West Coast Tiff. She wanted to know, Miss Denise, if you could, you mentioned having school on Saturdays for kids. Because you're a teacher, she just wondered what the curriculum would be, what you would deem the curriculum to be for that kind of school if we were to have it.
That's difficult because I'm not an early childhood educator. Actually, if you listen to Brother Akala from England, who is on Twitter, and there are some YouTubes with him, he talked a lot about how the Saturday schools shaped his life in England, where they taught sort of Pan-African curriculum to children because the British schools were not teaching that kind of history. And it really turned his life around. And I think that there are people who have set up liberation schools or whatever. Find some good educators who are clear about, K through 6, I guess, not even K through 12, but nowadays they've changed things around. We used to have junior high school. I don't know what you have now. It's middle schools or whatever. And look at what the public schools are deficient in and ensure that children get exposed to things they are not getting taught. There's a videotape, Hassan Jeffries, who is the brother of Hakeem Jeffries. I just saw his video today, and he was looking at like a standardized history textbook that is given to children in schools and critiquing it, and gather some of those things from people who know what they're talking about. And I certainly am not one of them. And figure out a way that you can do. Listen, a whole bunch of people in our community who are Christian, in quotes, send their kids to Sunday school where they get, church stuff. Well, maybe some of those Sunday schools could cover things other than the Bible and whatever. Or, like I said, Saturday schools. That's something we can talk about for the future. I'd love to listen to some people who do teach children. I am not familiar with teaching that age group. I've taught older kids. But it's a thought.
Absolutely. All right, the next person, the next question or comment, it's been surreal. Are you still with us? You've been waiting for a long time. I hope you're still able to comment. You can unmute yourself and go right ahead.
Okay, I am still here, and I want to thank you and Gigi and Kim for hosting this space, and of course, much thanks to Professor Oliver Velez for sharing your life story. And I guess to kind of keep it in the range of instruction, my question is, do you have any advice for those of us who are involved in academia and attached to academia and teaching at that level?
Yeah, though a lot of times my dear friends in academia are not always happy with what I have to say. We have become too attached to the, again, academic hierarchies and the idea of what academic education is, and playing into creating a separate elite that talk to only each other. They read each other's books. They vie for tenure or an associate professorship and manage to learn a whole nother language, which is othering, and get caught up in. I have never seen anything more vicious in my entire work life than what I have seen happen in academia. It is one of the most cutthroat professions I've ever had the misfortune to be around. And I use the term jargwage a lot because people get caught up in so much of academic language that they lose the ability to talk to regular folks. And my father, who had PhD and brilliant academic, blah, 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 said to me, if your grandmother can't understand you, you failed. Okay. And I see it from people that I was in grad school with who have now gone on to they're churning out books and doing whatever. But you want to know who's reading those books? Well, their friends that are professors assign them to their students, but it goes almost nowhere because we've created we've bought into this idea of academia. So you can have your MAs and PhDs and this and all those letters behind your name. But does it mean that any of that is going to be effective in organizing our communities? And not everyone does that, but I saw it after I retired from doing AIDS work because I was burned out. When I started teaching at New Paltz, I watched the young academics there, and it was very, very frustrating to see. And sometimes I would say to them, why don't you just speak fucking English, to your students? They're all got this glaze, but they know that they've got to regurgitate the lingo. So if it was in anthropology, they would stand up and say, and the epistemological, nomothetic, emic, ethic, dialogic deconstruction of the paradigm shift. With that in a fucking nickel, you cannot get on the subway. But again, it's buying into the already constructed idea of what academia is. And it scares me a lot.
And I will, we have to get to our list. I'm going to get to everybody. If you have your hand up, we have a list. We can see you, and we're going to get you in here. But it speaks to one of what you said was something that your father always used to tell you, that when I asked you for what advice you would give to activists, or you mentioned the same, and it's that what was the quote? If your grandmother can't understand you, you have failed. That same kind of notion of not speaking at people, but really, really talking to them. And as you said, actually speaking with them. Right. So the next commenter we have is Shauna. Shauna, if you're ready, please go ahead with your question or comment.
Thank you. Thanks, Renee and Geechee, for holding this space, and Kim. And thank you so much, Ms. Denise, for coming today and sharing your experiences with us. It's been an honor and privilege getting to know you, via Twitter. The question I have is, have you thought about writing like an autobiography or memoir for the stuff that you kind of talked about today? Because I haven't seen one out there. So have you been interested in writing one?
I have to laugh because years ago, I had a book contract with Dow Press to write my story. And the only reason I took it was because an attorney that we were working with said, I can get you in advance some money to write your book. And we used that money to fund somebody's legal defense. And I then dropped the idea and went off about my business. And years later, they found me and said, we have this book contract. And they gave me some more money. I took that money to bail some more people out. and I never wrote the book. I was able to sell parts of the book that I hadn't written to Harry Belafonte for a TV series, and I never did that either. Um, I am kind of allergic to the idea of writing a book and sitting down and doing it. I keep telling people I'm gonna wait until everybody I can talk about is dead, and I'll do it. So I guess I gotta live to be 90 to do it. I am much more comfortable talking to folks and not really that interested in an autobiography. My godson said he's going to come over here and do all these videotape interviews with me, and then it will be, there. If that happens, fine. If not, I'm okay. And quite a few of my friends are really annoyed with me because they think I should do this. But at this point in time, it ain't happening.
I laugh too because I have been trying to lightly encourage Miss Denise to write a memoir.
It ain't
Probably for like
happening.
the last year and a half, I've just been in her mentions like, "Hey, don't you want to write a memoir?" And I think that if a memoir is not the proper um, avenue or medium for you, then yeah, perhaps a documentary where you can sit and share these stories. And I am gonna keep that as my little secret wish and try to push the universe for that as much as possible, because I think, as we all can see today, you have so much wisdom to share, and I personally want as many people to experience that as possible. So it's just a little request that I'm going to keep for the universe, and I'm going to just keep hoping for it. As we continue to get to know one another. But you already know, I have plans. Okay, so the next person that we have on our list is Crystal. Crystal, thank you for joining us. And yeah, you can go right ahead with your question or comment.
Bendición, Miss Denise. Bendiciones, and I thank you, Kim and Geechee and Renee, for having this space. I'm eternally grateful, and I'm a big fan. And thank you again for everything you've ever done para Puerto Rico and Vieques. I have a quick question, and it speaks to Miss Carla came in earlier. We host a space, particularly based on historical events and trying to inform the populace of how we got here as a people. And what I notice often that is being said is, yeah, but we haven't done anything and we haven't gotten anything. And so as a person who idolizes practically her elders and listens to all the stories you've been through, knowing with my eyes open how much further we have to come as a people, united in the nation and abroad, could you speak on the progress you've seen thus far, particularly with regard to your activism firsthand, and how far we've come as a people? Because I think youth and even people my age, I'm in my 40s, don't understand just how far we've come. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear. And I hear people moaning and groaning and wringing their hands, and we're getting nowhere, and da 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 da. Again, it is not looking at history and seeing how far we've come. The United States, okay, is a very new country in the span of history. Very young. And it has not been around for centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries. And the fact that I can sit here and tell you that my mother used to talk about all her conversations with great Aunt Sally, who was enslaved okay? We're not that far away from that period in time. And in that period in time, we have come a long way, you know. Now, there are back steps that happen. And as Black people, we're only like, what, 13% of the population in the United States, if that. If we had better coalitions with people of the Latino persuasions, because there are multiple groups, we'd be a more powerful group, right? But to think that we haven't achieved anything is wrong. You know, the hard work, the blood, sweat, and tears, the deaths of many of our ancestors have pushed us forward. And sometimes when it looks like, oh, everything is just fucked up, it really isn't if you put it in a historical perspective. But unfortunately, again, there's a reason why we are kept from learning those histories, learning about those victories, and essentially we focus on, you know, the lynchings and the this and, you know, people dead from the police, you know, and all of that. Rather than seeing how slowly but surely we have moved forward. Was it you who looked up how many HBCUs there are in
Yes,
the
ma'am. And that was our space. And I just want to say just how much you've motivated us to ensure that wherever there's a gap, we filled it in. And yes, ma'am, that was me personally. Yes.
Thank you. I thought I remembered that. You know, with what started with one, you know, has grown. We have to make a list. Sometimes you have to make like a gratitude list, you know. What are you grateful for that you have in your life today? I'm grateful for all the young people that I've had a chance to interact with on this app. You know, I'm grateful for these spaces. This would not have been possible when I was younger. We didn't have this. So take the tools that we have and use them to our advantage. We have a major tool in the ability to instantly communicate with each other, meet each other, become friends with each other. If you're in Pensacola, Florida, or New Orleans, or Chicago, or Podunk, you know, we can be attached to each other in very immediate and instantaneous ways. That's so powerful. Unfortunately, we don't always use that tool, you know, and people spend all their time dealing with Beyonce's fighting with this one and that one and the other one and stupid Kanye. And, you know, those are distractions. Focus on using the new tools that we've been given to inch things forward. And I say inch for a reason, because you got to have inches that make up feet that then make up yards. You can't jump to the yard from Jump Street. So, you know, I have not given up hope. I will never give up hope. I will never give up my joy, and nobody is going to take it away from me. And I've been through horrible things in my life, but you don't see me sitting on here whining all the time, you know, because that's pointless. And folks that are downers get on my damn nerves. You know, I go off and listen to some music. So, be grateful and do something very simple. Sit down and make a gratitude list. Get 10 things that you're grateful for. I don't care whether it's, I have a bar of soap today. You know, I have hot water, I have heat, I have soap, and there are people that don't have any of those things. And because I know what my ancestors lived through, I know that I better be grateful. I stand on their shoulders. I stand on everything they did to survive, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be here. And that's important, to put things into the proper historical perspective.
Amen. And wonderful advice. I'm going to keep it right rolling so that we can get more folks in here who have questions. Mickey, you are up next. Please go ahead with your question or comment.
Hi, thank you very much, Miss Denise. Just, again, a person who has, definitely admire your thoughts and opinions. I became familiar with the Young Lords when, my mom, who used to run a nonprofit, invited this guy over for dinner named Luis Garnacosta. So it was just kind of like
El Puente.
yeah, El Puente. So yes, that's how I kind of became familiar with the Young Lords. And my grandfather, who was quite a bit older than my mother, actually went to Liberia with the Garvey movement. So yeah, I'm familiar. We have that in common. But I want to know, how did you, um, as the 60s and into the 70s, and the Black Panther Party was just kind of, facing a lot of struggles and turmoil. How did you not become disillusioned? How are you still active and participating in, the struggle, and haven't given up, is kind of what I want to know, because you've talked about people who want microwave and instant results. How do you, maintain your resilience in the face of what is, what I, am now becoming to accept will be a lifelong kind of struggle to break down systemic racism and other forms of oppression?
Good question. I mean, it was touch and go for a period of time after running and getting busted and people close to me being killed. I went home to my mother's house and crawled into the bed and did not get out of the bed except to go to the bathroom and eat for about 6 months. I was in a bad way. And for a period of time, to wash away the pain and suffering, I started drinking very heavily and whatever. And thankfully, I had a spiritual awakening and stopped. And some people didn't, and I lost many comrade brothers and sisters to that, what I call post-revolutionary stress disorder of different kinds. They were committing suicide a day at a time. Eventually, what has helped me, and other people have found different things to do. There's no one path to it. I definitely credit putting more spirituality into my life, and Renee was talking about love. There's this saying, that a true revolutionary is guided by love for the people, and you really have to start with loving yourself more and saying, okay, I got to pick myself up, and no matter what, head forward, no matter what ills, what pains, what trauma, whatever. And I'm blessed that worked for me. It may not work for everybody else. I can't answer that. But people need to dig deep into themselves and find some wellspring of joy. I don't care whether it's playing with puppies, I have a friend who's very, very political and whatever, but comes on Twitter to look at cat pictures, because they lift her spirits. There are other things on Twitter other than us bitching and screaming at each other about politics. Um, find something that gives you joy, and that will carry you forward. And also, don't be afraid to get help either. Unfortunately, any kind of mental disturbance in our community in particular tends to be stifled. There's still too much stigma um, attached um, to even getting some kind of outside help. I'm very lucky that I'm married to somebody who, has been a case manager for many, many years. He's not working now because he had a stroke, but for years and years and years, and was very good at what I call empathy, not sympathy, because I was taught sympathy's in the dictionary between shit and syphilis. It's empathy, and nurturing that empath in us enables us first to heal ourselves and then to work with others. And it's not easy not getting discouraged, but I have found ways to say, okay, what am I going to accomplish today? And if I don't accomplish today, I don't beat myself up with it. No baseball bats for me. I beat myself with a feather, okay? And that has helped a lot. When things, I'm a survivor of rape, all of those kinds of things. And I was part of a group called Women Healing Each Other. We formed, and it was wonderful just to be able to share with other sisters some of the things that was going on, in my life and in their lives, and to be there to support each other. So whatever kind of support you can get also is really, really key. And that's basically where I'm coming from on that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Mickey, for that question. Because it's important, right? As we talk about, how you cope and how you get by and get along. So it's really important, right? Especially right now. The next person that we have on our list is a survivor extraordinaire. Ironically enough, if you're ready with your question or comment, please go right ahead. French, are you ready? Maybe she has stepped away for a moment. Okay, let's see. I believe the next person on our list we'll come back to her. Eddie, are you ready with your question or comment?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Go jump right in.
The internet is, being the internet and jumping around. Thank you for this. I've listened to most of it. It's just fascinating. And since it's being recorded, I hope people who couldn't get all of it, even if you did get all of it, to go back and take the time to listen to it. I want to ask Denise something, which a topic we've discussed before. You mentioned earlier that back in the day there were many other groups besides the Panthers and the Young Lords, particularly the League of Revolutionary Black Workers and many others. And at that time, I was in different groups. Most of these groups you were in a year or two or three before they fell apart or they split or moved on. But we all considered ourselves part of an international revolutionary left, which also didn't last very long and really doesn't exist except in microscopic form today. For people that are trying to find today the lessons of that era from more of a standpoint of trying to recreate a left that is sustainable and democratic and good and deals with the right issues, what would be some of the lessons that you could provide to people that weren't around during that time that we were. Thanks.
It's good to see you, Eddie. And how are you feeling?
Hanging in. Was in the hospital about a week ago, but I'm back home, getting old and still fighting the best I can.
I hear you. That's difficult. Because in order to, it goes back again to not knowing history. We have been sold a bill of goods that there were only like 2 organizations, people say, the civil rights movement, or whatever, or the left. And very little of that recent history, and when I say recent, I mean in the last like 60 years or so, are people even aware of? I bring up organizations that I watched, some I was a part of, some where I was allied with, some I wasn't. And it's like it's been erased completely. You cannot build on a foundation that you don't have. And you can't tinker with it, fix it, or do whatever if you aren't even aware of what's broke. And again, it goes back to, I spent one of the most productive things in my education was when I was in grad school. I had a professor who set up a seminar, and there were only 6 of us in the seminar. And for an entire year, all we did was look at movement groups, splits, counter splits, all of the stuff that happened back then, and analyze actually what happened with each group. And I can start spit, not just League of Revolutionary Black Workers, Drum, LRUM, you can look at RIM 1, RIM 2, SDS, blah, 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 across the board. But that doesn't exist anymore. People now just go, oh, DSA or the Green Party, and hello. Or they'll mention, maybe they'll mention the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Maybe they vaguely know that there was CORE. Maybe they know that there was SNCC, but I don't even think most people knew anything about the Snickers. And what about Republic of New Africa? All of these different elements that are fairly recent because, all of us are not dead yet. So some of us are still here. So it's not ancient history. And what happened to them? And I'm not just talking about, because some people have said, oh yes, well, all of that got killed by COINTELPRO. That's the excuse. No, that's bullshit. There were internal contradictions and things that need to be examined. But again, it means taking the time to actually study something. And you don't have to be sitting in a classroom either to do it. Again, young people have access to, there is more information available now than there ever was. And a lot of stuff that was on microfilm and whatever has been digitized, PDF'd. And it means taking the time to learn. You don't have to go to school to do it. Be your own school. But I think that some of us who are elderly need to be more open about talking about some of this too. That's why I'm very grateful to having been invited to this space, because at least I can try to answer to the best of my ability some of the questions that come up. But Eddie, you were there, and you went through a lot of that stuff. And to just have, I get really annoyed about how the left is portrayed, and anybody that's willing to deal with electoral politics is all of a sudden some kind of centrist, whatever, that's the cuss word now, a centrist corporatist. They call me when I had that shit. I just had to laugh. You know, they have no clue. But it tends to discourage people from dealing with. First of all, you have to fight on multiple fronts at all times, and be very aware, even if you're not totally focused on something, be aware of other groups and form alliances with other groups that are dealing with, different parts of the puzzle, and be open to it. But now you've got this. I don't know what these people who call themselves progressives are. I really don't. I don't understand them. I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And they pat themselves on the back. They're progressive. Yeah, well, like I said, with that goddamn nickel, I can't get on New York City subway. So I wish we could just trash all of that and start all over. But unfortunately, we can't, because we also have to build on their mistakes as well. But, that's a long. I'm sorry if I got long-winded, but I'm glad you raised it, Eddie. Thank you.
Thank you for your point, Eddie, and all the best to you. I believe Survivor Extraordinaire are you back, girl? Can you hear me?
I'm here.
All right. All right. Go right ahead with your question or comment. I'm glad you were able to get back in the room.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Renee, Geechee, and Nakim. I am just thrilled. As soon as I saw this, I was like, okay, I'll make sure I've eaten, I've done whatever, because I'm really grateful for just the information from Miss Denise. And I love storytelling, and I love this opportunity to learn. So I feel like I've gotten extra creases in my brain this morning. So thank you, Miss Denise, so much just for everything that you've done. I do have a couple of quick questions. I think because my background a lot of times is in protective services through social work and community activism, working with unhoused and families that are in crisis from abuse. And a lot of my volunteer work has been about, building local community centers in Southern California, those types of things, as far as activism and doing things like on a lot of times micro levels and kind of community level. And so one of the things that I've found in a lot of the different areas of activism is that a need for harm reduction. And so I had like two questions. The first one was about that. And I think you kind of touched on it when you were talking, I think it was Mickey, about the women healing each other group, but just when we're out here and we talk about organizing and we talk about a lot of things, but one of the things personally, I've survived some things in that field. And I'm wondering in what ways, even when you were with the Lords and the Black Panther Party, that women within the movement or vulnerable people within the movement were able to manage harm reduction.
That's a good question. Difficult to answer. It depends. Some groups manage to set up support networks to lean on each other and to help each other, and some groups didn't. It's one of the bigger failings, and a lot of harm got done to people's individual sort of psyches. There was abusive stuff that a lot of us just are not. I know some people who literally have not been able to talk about this stuff for decades. They just kind of locked it away and tried to keep going on with their lives. And because it has been characterized as sort of counter-revolutionary, if you bring up any of the ugly shit, you're undermining the revolution. All right. And not understanding it's the ugly shit that did the undermining. Okay. It's victim blaming on a revolutionary level. Okay. And that I have. And then, of course, if you bring up any of those criticisms, then the right and the right wing takes them, distorts it, twists it, and so you're walking this fine line. A lot of it has to be done sort of in private and not in public in some cases, but it's clearly there, and so many of us are survivors of a broad spectrum of things, whether it's familial or organizational or societal, taking it on multiple layers. Sometimes it's all of those things. So how we do that, and first, I think each person's going to have to look in the mirror and face that there's a deep need for cleansing a lot of this stuff out and getting some kind of support. And whatever it is you find, that's fine, But to pretend that the ugly isn't there just causes festering. And when you end up talking out the side of your neck because you've got so many different anger issues and unresolved issues. So if I'm sounding very therapy oriented, there are lots of things that are therapy. I used to say to somebody, they asked me, did I sit and meditate? I said, no, I go out and pull weeds in the garden. And that's my meditation, but it helps a lot. Yanking them damn weeds up. I used to envision who I was strangling as I did it. I worked out a lot of my anger out in the yard, but that worked for me. Some people it's cooking. I don't know, or knitting, whatever, running, screaming, banging on drums. Find a way. That's basically where I'm coming from.
Absolutely. Thank you, Survivor Extraordinaire.
Thank you.
I love cooking, of course. Cooking is my way to heal, but I'm gonna try that whole pulling weeds out while imagining strangling someone. I'm gonna try that soon because that sounds a lot like a lot of fun. Mac, you are next. Are you ready to go ahead with your question or comment?
Yes, I am.
All right.
All right. First of all, let me say thank you, Renee, my Chi-Town sister. And thank you, Miss Denise. I've been on here for quite some time now, and there have been so many things that just piqued my interest that you were talking about. The first statement was about you being in church and being an atheist, and the importance of when you're doing community activism is being able to pull people in and not push people out. I got so much out of that because we see so much of that going on right now with the divisiveness of the left and the far left and the progressives and so forth and so on. I also heard you speak about the importance of what, and this just is me speaking figuratively, about planting the seed of wisdom and passing on those experiences. See, what I got out of what you said was that, you can learn from other people's experiences, right? The positive and the negative, not only what to do, but what not to do. So again, the importance of you speaking today is like you're planting the seed of wisdom in everyone that's listening today. So I really, really appreciate that. So I don't really have a question. These were all the things that I was picking up during your conversation. And you also said something about Brixton. I played professional basketball in Brixton 30 years ago. So soon as you said Brixton, I was like, what? And I tried to type in a question, say that you didn't finish it. You had got cut off, and you came back and you were like, what was I talking about? And I was like, Brixton. I'm screaming in the phone. So, man, it was just so good to have that 1 second to reminisce about, my experience over there. And the importance of the young lady that spoke about being from her experience in other countries and all that, because that's what I experienced. And I noticed, how Black America is treated, not only in the United States, but throughout other countries. We are suppressed in other countries also, And the other thing I wanted to say is that it's so disheartening to see our Hispanics and Latina sisters and brothers. There is such a level of hatred towards Black people from our Latino brothers and sisters. And it breaks my heart because I grew up in an area called Humboldt Park. And and like you were saying, how you grew up in the Bronx and we all just kicked it. And the gangs, yeah, they were doing their thing. But for the most part, the neighborhoods, we got along in those neighborhoods, we were brothers and sisters in those neighborhoods. And at the end of the day, I love my Latina brothers and sisters, but for some reason, we see that they're more likely to go with the right than they are to, go with the left. And it's very disheartening because, I don't know. It's just, I think that we're, as people, both our cultures are suppressed and oppressed, and we should come together more so than anything. So just to kind of wrap it up, I've enjoyed this. I've been on it all morning, all afternoon rather, just like kind of doing my little cleanup and eating lunch and enjoying this. Again, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I want to give a quick shout out to Steve Harvey and the Kings of Comedy. And he said one of the reasons why he used to be attracted to go to church was because he always knew Miss Odessa was going to give him one, that she was the cussing lady in the church. And I got so much out of every time you let one loose on this chat. And it just brought me so much comfort. I thank you so much.
You're
Again,
welcome.
thank you
And
so
I
much.
just put a link that somebody is going to maybe, I don't know how to do it, but
Geechee's gonna do it. Yeah.
okay, because one of the things I did for Black Coast, which by the way is Tuesday and Friday, every Tuesday and Friday at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, Black Coast goes up, and there are different people who write commentaries for Black Coast. One is the founder, David Reed. He is on Twitter. Another is Chi-Town Kev, who is on Twitter. Another is Sister Joan Marr, who is on Twitter, and me. And we have history, news, arts. We do a Twitter roundup every Tuesday and Friday. And a lot of that is there and available, but for the last couple months, or the last 2 years or so, maybe if we get 40 or 50 people in there to read it, we're doing good, and there's a wealth of information. And I'm not just saying that because I'm one of the editors. There's so much. I remember Sister Joan Marr did an entire series on the Maroons of Jamaica, and Dopper has done things on the ancient kingdoms all across the African continent that are brilliant, worth reading. I wrote a thing about Brixton and the Panthers in England, but it doesn't do any good to do all this work if ain't nobody gonna come and read it. So I encourage you to take a look at what we're doing and come in and talk about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And check out, I mean, if you follow Miss Denise, you see she's always constantly retweeting, obviously her own pieces, but, pieces that are written by others from Daily Kos. So always check her feed because she's always got a lot of great things to share. I do want to ask a question that was sent to us from Miss Danny. Miss Danny is a part of our collective, of course, and she's always in our spaces. And she just wanted to ask you, Miss Denise, obviously we're all very active here on Twitter and fighting misinformation and disinformation, but she wanted to ask you specifically if you had tips for how we fight misinformation and disinformation with what's going on in some of the spaces regarding ADOS folks and foundational Black Americans, FBAs, if you know, because you have encountered them obviously on the timeline. And Geechee actually has been very proactive in going in some of these spaces and challenging them as much as possible. And he does such an amazing job with it. But she wondered if you had kind of tips for how we could possibly engage some of these folks when we do go into some of these spaces to try to challenge them on what they're spreading. Miss Denise, can you hear me?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I said, Geechee, you're brave. You're a better man than I am, Gunga Din. Because
Yes, ma'am, you did.
I am tired of fussing at these folks. And, I guess the best thing to do is truth is a weapon, and challenge absolute made up hotep weirdo untruths with facts. And it may not convince the person that you're in that particular dialogue with, but somebody may hear it and move away from having their mind manipulated. What is scary for me, I think, having lived through disinformation period of COINTELPRO and stuff that was being put out by other agencies of the government, when people get caught up in fantasy land, it's very hard to stick a pin in their bubble, and I just go back to the facts. Just like I said earlier on, when people start talking this foundational what the fuck is foundational Black Americans? That has no meaning whatsoever. And it does not jive with history, and all of these people then need to be told point blank, I am sorry, but that is not what happened. That is not the history. You need to go all the way back to the African continent, which is not one country, and look at the influences that were brought this way from whether it's Congo, whether it's Benin, whether it's what is now Yoruba land, and and then you need to know some of the history of Brazil. You need to know some of the history of the Caribbean. You need to know the Black diaspora that went to Europe, and some even was in Asia, and Melanesia, and bring all those things together, because they are teaching lies. And that's the only thing you can do, and hope that somebody listens. I mean, I don't have the time. I have enough on my plate to go into spaces, and that's why I said, bless you, Geechee, if you're willing to do that, if there are other people that are willing to do that. I have tried to have sensible conversations with some of them, but I also have to warn you that there is money behind a bunch of this stuff. We already know that there are paid bots and trolls. We already know that John Tanton is one of the people that helped initially fund what became ADOS. And there is an agenda, anti-immigrant agenda, has to do with white supremacy and money that's behind that, and it's linked. So you have to. I watched disinformation spread vis-a-vis COINTELPRO, and it ended up with brothers shooting each other. That it was all based on a Hummer. It was all bullshit, But like I said, I don't put all the blame for problems on COINTELPRO, but I'm looking at a lot of the people that are following this stuff and spouting this stuff don't even realize how they're being manipulated. They buy into something that they can take pride in. I'm special, and I was kind of like, no, they all think that if they exclude more people, their reparations check will be bigger. Don't hold your breath. That's all I have to say on that.
That's an interesting theory. But thank you so much for pointing out that there is money behind it, that there is an agenda behind it, because we've been talking about that for a minute, and it's just so obvious. And I think that is something very important to remember as we are engaging in these conversations, that there's vested interest in keeping us divided, as always. So to be suspicious of that and to be cautious of that as we're moving about, and block them liberally, because that is absolutely what I do, especially the ones that are very extreme and the ones that are really, really disrespectful. Not all of them are, but many, many of them are. And so to keep it moving, Supermassive, you're next. I hope you can hear me, because I think you've been kicked out a few times. So hopefully you're able to speak. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay,
Thank
go
you.
right
Thank you.
ahead. No
All
problem.
right. So I'm very grateful and honored to be in the presence of Miss Denise as a fellow Denise. Seen you on Twitter. I've read about I've read about you. It's, oh goodness. And it's been a joy to sort of listen to the discussion. I just want to reach out to my sister, my Liberian sister in Florida. I followed you. I don't know if she's still on here, but I followed her because I have family in South Florida, and I'm doing a little bit of political organizing down there to help with the electoral process. So I hope to connect with her to talk about her program, because I could probably connect her with some folks. My late mother was an elementary school teacher, and she had a mentoring program that she started within her church, which was about getting educational foundation, teaching math skills, having a male or female figure if a child didn't have one in the household. Outside of Christianity, through her church, it did become controversial because she wasn't preaching. She was actually trying to give kids life skills. But hopefully, I'll join your music blog, and then we could maybe rap about that a little bit more in detail. My question is, and I think it's really dovetailing off of Eddie's question, which was that I find that the left, whatever that means, and I think you nailed that. Whatever that means, I'm not sure anymore. And I find it very difficult because that group of people who identify as progressives are not progressive. They actually are regressive, and they seem to me to horseshoe with the right in their resentment of Black power. And I see this with the way that they try to depress our vote, the way that they try to depress our organizing, or when you talk about like Obama or any sort of like you said, an increment, an inch, any sort of movement that we're able to make, they
Uh-oh. Can you hear me, Denise?
I'm here.
You're
But oh, you need. Okay.
Yes. Well, I think we may have lost her. She's been having connection issues, I think, kind of throughout. So I'll see if I can get her back in. I'll DM her. Oh, maybe she can come back in now. Let's see. Okay. Supermassive, are you there?
I'm just like, I'm done before I drop out. But thank you, Miss Denise. If you could talk a little bit about what, and maybe your experiences with working with people on the white people on the left, really. I look at the Bernie people in particular as being very problematic as far as they seem to resent Black power. And it's very difficult to sort of network and organize with people who are so hostile to the fact that you don't fit in their poverty model, this poverty mindset that they have about Black people, that if you aren't helpless and they can't rescue you, you don't have any value to them.
I ain't got time for them. To be very honest, I mean, I have been dealing with the quote unquote white left for a lot of years. And there were some folks that we allied with who were wonderful. There were people I think a lot of people don't know about something that grew out of the Panther Party. They had across the country all of these groups, National Committee to Combat, NCCFs, National Committees to Combat Fascism, and who accepted that the Panther Party was somebody to be listened to. They were willing to subordinate themselves, and other portions of the right left could not handle that, at all. So I have been through the, whatever you want to call them, Bernie wars, and which ripped Daily Kos in half, pretty much. I mean, it got really, really, really ugly. And at one point, a whole bunch of us did walk away, black out, meaning exit stage left for a week. And that included white folks. So it wasn't just everyone who was white. It was people who had a particular point of view. And I was particularly annoyed with all of the predictions in the election that, all the first caucuses that took place and whatever, and they were already predicting this stuff. And I was like, wait until they get to North Carolina. They're going to have a rude awakening, because the power of Black folks in the Democratic Party gets kind of dismissed. We fought very long and hard for that to happen. I grew up with grandparents who were stone cold Republicans, all right? And my grandfather used to sit in the chair, Party of Lincoln, and we've worked hard to get to where we are. We've worked hard to get to, again, this is about history. I bring up Ron Dellums all the time, and people look at me like I have two heads. Who? And I'm like, founder of the Progressive Caucus. He got elected by Sisters in the Black Panther Party, running around banging on doors and getting people out to vote. He mentored Barbara Lee, who was considered to be the most progressive Black person in Congress until she co-chaired Kamala Harris's campaign, and they dropped her like a hot potato, And these are the things that people need to be aware of when they see them happening. We have to get pragmatic Black people into office. We then have to work, and there are some contradictions that we also have to deal with when I have to point out to some of my very radical Boricua, Puerto Rican friends that you are not going to win friends and make allies if you sit and spend all of your time blaming what's going on in Puerto Rico on Barack Obama. Okay? It ain't helping. Yeah, I know. Promesa sucks. Okay? But there's a whole long history of electing white elites in Puerto Rico who are a bunch of crooks, you know, and you're going to turn off some of your allies to the struggle. People have to learn how to win allies. You don't have to agree on everything, but you know, and I have been fairly quiet about it. I have just quietly stopped retweeting some people. And you all know I get up every morning at 4:30 in the morning, collect stuff, and before 7:30 I put out how many days it's been since Hurricane Maria. Because I made a commitment, I made a promise I would do that. I would not drop talking about PR. And because I'm a Black American, I know that there are more Black folks following me than who are following somebody who gets up every morning and tweets in Spanish, which is totally not useful if you're trying to win allies here on the mainland, you know. So, anyway, I'm sorry. I wandered off of your point.
No, thank you for that. And we are we had two more speakers, Brian Wilson, but I think Brian dropped out. So Khalil, we're rounding out our speakers with you, and I think that's as God and the universe would intend it. And so we've been going for a while, and I'm sure that this conversation has been wonderful for you. So very much looking forward to your comments. And actually, Brian is back. And because I kind of want to close with you, Khalil, I'm going to go to Brian first because he was next on our list. So, Brian, if you're ready, please go ahead because you're probably having tech issues. So, want to make sure you get your question in.
Yeah,
okay.
Thanks for calling on me.
Go right ahead. No problem.
I just wanted to sound a positive note because I'm sitting here in the Silicon Valley, so I'm actually quite close to technology. And so I wanted to ask or even maybe suggest that what role will technology play? Because you kind of touched on it. And I just wanted to remind everyone that the Iranian Revolution was won with technology, as well as in Cuba. I mean, those are revolutions, but you know what I mean? But could you kind of talk about technology more and how it'll play a role? Because I actually see that it will, in the sense that I kind of believe that we're going to evolve beyond the power of the state because of technology. That's my point. That's it.
I think that that's a good point. I don't think it's going to happen as quickly as we think, mainly because there are still too many people who are uncomfortable with it. We have not spent. All right, I'm 75, and I made a commitment to learn how to get on Twitter. You know, first I made a commitment to learn. I had already been on the internet, but I didn't know anything about blogs or any of this other kind of stuff. And thankfully, I have a godchild who, you know, walked me through all of it and got me engaged and said, you know, this is going to be really helpful to you. We're not doing enough of that. Some people, you know, the only thing they know about technology is that they're on Facebook to share pictures of their kids. Okay. And we have not figured out a way to bring people's tech skills up. I was very lucky also that I happened to have a really good friend who turned out to be one of the first major early hackers, who taught me stuff about internet security and whatever. And I was willing to sit down and listen. And sometimes I'm slow, like getting into these spaces things. But I know that you don't mean technology just related to the internet. There are all kinds of other technological advances. And in many ways, our communities are locked out of things, and we need to support a lot of the younger people who are doing things about energy, about I know there's a collective of young folks who are doing solar things. And that's beyond the comprehension of a lot of people who are just busy trying to get to work, not get COVID, feed their kids. And back in the day, that would have been something that we were dealing with in what we call community PE, community political education. And maybe it should be community political education and, political and technological information, and do that kind of work. There's no reason that people can't go into, again, churches and other places where people in the community gather and begin to demystify technology. A lot of the discussion that takes place is so above the heads of folk that they're not going to listen. Learn how to break shit down and show where this is useful, and get people engaged. And it shouldn't only be, and even our younger kids often are not getting enough of this in school. Again, it all goes back to us being willing, to take the time. I mean, I am so grateful to my godchild, who is actually a tech person, who walked me through a lot of things, and I could call up and say, I don't know what's gone wrong, but I'm not afraid to say I don't understand. And a lot of times people, act like, well, that's not important, mainly because they don't want to say, I don't understand this shit. So those of you who have the knowledge, figure out ways it should not just be conversations between techies, and I'm not saying that to be disparaging of people with technological skills and competency, but how do we expand the people who have access and understanding? And that's something to think about.
Absolutely. And thank you for your answer. And Brian, thank you for that question. Ms. Denise, before we get to Khalil, I just wanted to share with you a comment from Jason, who basically just said he wanted to thank you and let you know how much your support and pushing back against anti-Semitism on this application on Twitter has meant to him, because he truly believes that we're all stronger together. And he's learned a lot from listening to you today, and that you're one of his very, very favorite follows. So he just wanted to thank you. I wanted to share that really quick before we move to Khalil. Khalil, are you ready? Because I think we're ready for you. And you are the last comment, so make it good.
We gave you 5 whole minutes, Khalil. 5 whole minutes.
Hi, Khalil.
Hello, Denise. It is, I am here to celebrate Sister Denise. I cannot tell you how much this means to me as an old head to hear young sisters and brothers and allies, just sit in this room for the time that we sat in this room, to hear her stories, to hear her understanding of our experience, to understand the history that she's intimately engaged in. Where else could this happen? Where else is it happening any place else in the world? I mean, no place. So I know it's per forma to thank the host for for having this space, but I can't. There are no words to express just my gratitude for just the recognition that Renee and Geechee and Kim had to be able to hold this space, to recognize the importance of telling our story. We're finally telling our story. That's the thing to really appreciate. I hear these young people say all the time how, and Denise touched on this, Sister Denise, how we haven't done anything, we haven't gone anywhere, you know, older folks let us down and all of those things, and that's because they have such a void in their appreciation and understanding of history. So they don't know what took place, but yet they got a comment on it or they got insight on it, and they don't even know it. So rather than jump all over them, I've chosen to just sit in the rooms, sit in the gallery and learn from them and try to find my own voice. What I've found is that when you have a treasure like Denise, someone that can tell a story in such an intimate way, we can't hear enough from her. I dare say that there are most people in this room never even heard of her until the day, until Geechee and Renee sent out the invitation. They didn't know who we were talking about. And I really didn't appreciate who Denise was really until a couple of weeks ago because we didn't realize it. I didn't realize it, but I go all the way back, and of course she took me back again today with some of the things she was bringing up, some of the places she was bringing up, the stories she was telling, the people she knows. I was giggling so hard that my stomach hurt. So I needed this moment in so many ways, and I and I dare say if I need it, I know you all do. And I know you've been nourished by this information, but nourished by her grace. She's such an incredible woman, you know, and has lived such an incredible life and is part of such an incredible family. So we need to continue to find those folks just like Denise who have stories to tell and to make sure they get heard. And Spaces allows us to do that in ways that we never, ever thought was possible. So again, it may be pro forma, but I'm telling you what you guys done today is an extension, in my mind anyway, of the civil rights movement. It's part of that, what I think is the third reconstruction that you hear, people talking about all the time, where we're actually trying to get to that moral dynamic, that we didn't have, Denise didn't have, that, in the movement she was involved in, or wasn't appreciated, but they stood on that. Now we got to get other people to show up like grown-ups and stand on theirs. And I'm just can't tell you how ecstatic I am. Eddie called in and I'm going to celebrate, anybody and everybody that got through it. Denise, you gave me a new phrase that I don't know why it's new to me because I should have known, the post-revolutionary stress disorder. Um, I've been living that too. I understand exactly what you're saying. I think the reason that I did go through a depressive period, and mine didn't come until the 90s after I got sick for a little bit. So sitting home, that generativity kicked in and started started looking at my life, looking back on it, and it was a little sobering at times. But I think, for me, I've always been looking to understand and had a religious search. The joke in my family is that I've been everything but Jewish, and I think that probably helped me to keep it together and to keep moving and just running up and down the coast trying to stay engaged in things did it as well. But the real difference with me was marrying this incredible woman that that allowed me to feel a little bit more confident about standing still. Because I think for a long time I felt like I was a target, which was just the fear that you get when you grow up in a household such as I did and you did. So, but you don't care. You just because you're a target, you just keep going. But I'm just appreciative of the fact that you confirmed that for me. I learned in this today. I learned that's what I was dealing with, and I didn't really think about. I knew I was depressed. Now, of course, clinically understood it, but I didn't understand this attachment to my past until you helped me understand that today. So I'm going to praise you for that, along with so many other things. I certainly appreciate you reminding people who who are looking at our past and not realizing that that past is the foundation for our present. That we don't get here without the sacrifices made previously, sacrifices like you made and people before you and so on made. And I'm just, you know, I'm giggling like a teenager right now. Just all that's transpired in these just really few hours. Because I guarantee you, folks in this room could probably listen to you for hours more. Because you're telling our story, and our story just didn't get told. That's why we're so excited about the summer, the biopic by Questlove, because we're finally telling our story. We have the money, we have the research, we have the influence to tell our story. You know, you know, you see each other on HBO and Netflix and Hulu and all that. Those stories were never told before. We never sat down and talked to each other like we're able to do right now. And I just want to tell you, and just confirm for you that you're part of the reason that's all so true. You really, really are. So I want to celebrate you, sister, and I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody that took the time to sit in this room and learn from this treasure, that she is. And thank you all for, just you know understand the importance of this moment. And it may not be big to you, but this old head knows better. I really do know better. I'm feeling this from my toes to the top of my head. And I just want to thank you all and celebrate you all and ask Denise, when you going to come back, sister.
Love you, brother. Thank you. You old head, you know, stick around. We gotta stay here longer, and your bones might start to ache and whatever, but hang in there, because there's a reason that we have people who manage to make it through, and that's part of that continuity, and there's a reason we have young bloods who are in some ways fearless and crazy at the same time. You need to have that kind of energy as well. It's a balance, and it's part of, oh God, I sound like that damn movie, The Circle of Life, a Lion King or something. But it's very real. And I'm glad that you could share that you've faced your own post-revolutionary stress disorder awakening moment, and we really do have to say those things, it's so important, because it gives younger folks, when they're frustrated and feel like it's not worth it, it gives them a way to say, okay, I'll soldier on at some point. I may have to take some time out, but it'll be okay. And it is, it is okay. No matter what, you just have to say, it is okay. As long as you're not in a grave, you're going to do okay. And I always say that, listen, I'm not dead yet, so I still have work to do. And I will keep working until I am in that grave. And then I plan to come back again. But that's my own shit.
Amen.
Well, I hope to meet you in the next lifetime as well as this one, because I'm pretty sure you'll be fabulous in that one as well. I am so full, you all. Like I cannot even describe how full I am. I've had the pleasure of having several conversations with Miss Denise, and every time we get off the phone, I'm just like, did I just talk to this woman? And oh my God, she's so amazing. And so to have been able to just create a space where you all can have access to more of her essence and her wisdom is all my pleasure and all my honor. And I'm humbled that I was able to do this along with my amazing team and Kim and Geechee. Thank you so much for your support. You helped to run this so smoothly. Can't thank you enough. Tiff's been in and out. She's been helping us. She's traveling. Safe travels home, sweetie. Thank you for your support and your encouragement. And this has just been a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. We have gone for 5 hours, y'all, and I feel energized still. So thank you so much to everyone who listened in and who came up and gave questions or comments. And Miss Denise, I'm gonna let you have the final word. I want you to share with us anything that you still want to say, that you haven't said or that we haven't asked that you think is important. And I will also pose a question from someone on the timeline who was just wondering what your advice is to, like, for college student activists and how they can build relationships, how they can speak to professors. And one of the reasons why I think that this is an interesting question is because I feel like we're all students. You obviously became an activist at a very young age, and a lot when you were a student, and then your trajectory of your life changed. But I feel like we're all still students, and you spoke to kind of academia and Black academics before. And I feel like on this app in particular, we are pushing back against a narrative that does come from sometimes a very kind of haughty place and a very distant place. And so, how do students kind of engage their professors, but how do we as students, even on this app as we're still learning, how do we engage people that kind of come from maybe that distance, because they are kind of pushing a narrative that really is not close to our hearts. It's not close to our home. And some of them have to know that, I feel, and this isn't a war. It's not a them versus us, but it is a perspective thing. And so just as we kind of continue to move throughout Twitter and use our voices on this app and in other places, how do we make sure that we're continuing to connect to people's real issues and that we're not speaking to them from a place of elitism or a place of distance? And so please, share what you have to say about that. But like I said, anything else that you want to close us out with as well.
First place, I want to thank you for having me, and I want to thank all the people who have hung in here. Lord, it's 6:30, but my groceries are not being delivered until 7:30, so I don't go to the store anymore. Anyway, what I would say to students is you're not always going to find professors that are open to hearing what you have to say, and you just kind of like do whatever it is to get your grades, to get your courses. College, it only lasts a few years, and then get the hell out. While you're there, make sure that you are also doing something that keeps you connected to the community. I don't care whether that at New Pulse, a number of the students were doing regular work with, this is my women's gender and sexuality students, were doing work in the local women's shelter, helping deal with, and they were actually working with the children that were there in the shelter and with the sisters that were in the shelter, because that again kept them grounded in the objective reality of what's happening to people in the community. And they were not, my students all had to come up to New Paltz, New York, which is 2 hours away from New York City, and these were mostly students from the city. This was a foreign environment, but college creates this sort of artificial environment, particularly when you're at a school where they have campuses. So this was a connection to reality. But a lot of professors are not going to want to hear what you have to say. Some are, but a lot are, you know, caught up in their professorship. So just do whatever it takes. Put in your 4 years, get the hell out, but don't believe the hype. You have not become superior to your Aunt Candy, you know, your mama's next door neighbor, because you got letters behind your name. And always you have to do like I call it a wellness check, you know. Am I tripping? And that's not always easy to do. Have you stopped having anything to do with your friends that you went to, you know, middle school with or high school with whose lives took a different path? Because now you are a college graduate. Check yourself on a regular basis. I am not knocking going to college. I am not knocking getting whatever, you know, education that is necessary for you to, you know, take the life path that you've decided on at this point in time. One thing I will say is just because you go to school and get a degree in, I don't know what, communication, whatever people are getting degrees in these days, doesn't mean that 20 years down the pike you might not be somewhere else. You know what my original major was? Art history, you know. And then it was urban studies. And then it was media studies. You know, I wandered my way through many different paths. And, you know, and all of it was useful. But just because I decided when I was, you know, 17 years old that this is what I wanted to be, actually, originally I wanted to be an archaeologist. And then they told me there are no women archaeologists, or almost none, and that none of them are black. So you need to forget about that. And I did. I shifted over to art history. But the point is, where you wind up 20 years from now may not be what you're planning on today. But as long as you stay connected to and grounded to your community, you can never go wrong, no matter which path you take as a young person. You know, the decisions you make today, this year, are not locked in stone. You know, you can always reinvent yourself and go some other place. So people who are having anxiety attacks about their future as an attorney or whatever, as a social worker, you know, take a deep breath. But the main thing is maintain a link to objective reality. The campus education, the college education, all that's well and good. But it's on paper, and trying to get your professors to change. Now, you may run into some wonderful professors, and I did. I was so blessed to have some that were great. I also had some that were racist pieces of shit. Okay. And there was nothing that was going to change them. Complaining to the chair of the department or whatever wasn't going to do anything. They had tenure. And you practically have to, like, you know, murder 12 people in the president's office to get fired from a university. I watched ugly shit happen. But I didn't let it stop me. So find the people who can be your allies, who are professors, who talk to you like you're a human being and not talk down at you. And there are some really good people who are teaching. They're committed to it. And the ones that are that you can't deal with, just hand in the damn papers that they want, do whatever it is, and get the hell out, and don't take their course with them again unless you absolutely have to have it as a requirement for your major. And spread the word to other students. I was lucky when I went back to school. I went back to grad school, and I was already, I don't know, close to 50. And there were young people that were in grad school that adopted me and helped me get through that shit. They reached out and they said, "Don't take a course with so and so. He's a never mind, I won't say." They got me through my first year. They were wonderful, and all of them were like, at least 20 years younger than I was, and some younger than that. So, do what you got to do to get out, and stay connected. That's all. And thank you again, everybody who came. And if I'm not following you on Twitter, somehow figure out a way to let me know. And because I'm always happy to talk to folks.
Yes, you are. And I'm grateful for that. And I know that everyone here today is. And I know that everyone who engages with you on your timeline or in your comments at the Daily Kos is very grateful that you are as accessible as you are. I've told you this before. I will continue to tell you this, that you continue to teach and share is. I mean, you've done so many amazing things, but that to me, I think is one of the most just outstanding is that you continue to be so accessible and just so genuine with who you are as an activist, as someone who moves people. Every time I speak to you, I feel inspired, and so thank you for that comment, especially the last, this last comment about reinventing yourself and not feeling like you have to stay stuck in one thing. Because I'm literally in the middle of that right now, and it's very encouraging. I think it's very encouraging for all of us because after the last couple of years, I do think that we obviously feel a shift, in the world, and so it is a good time for people to to explore their happiness and their peace, even in the midst of everything that's going on right now that's chaotic. It's important, and so for everything that you give to us, for everything that you've shared today, for everything that you have sacrificed, for all of these experiences that you have lived and that you will continue to live, that you will continue to share and have shared. We honor you. We appreciate you always. We will continue to support and to defend you fiercely on the timeline. And yeah, I hope that soon again you'll be able to meet up in the spaces and just continue to share your wisdom, because we covered a lot today, but the lessons that you have to teach us are still very more. So with all of my love and my gratitude, thank you so much for everything that you are and for joining us today. And I hope everybody enjoyed this. I know y'all did, because it's been 5 hours and we still kicking it.
Listen, I just looked at Twitter. These people are talking about they want Jon Stewart to be the president in 2024.
Oh my God.
Jesus F. Christ.
Well,
I
you already
cannot even believe this shit. I'm not gonna get in there and kick ass. Thank you.
Maybe take a minute and get your groceries and get back at it, because you've done a good service today. So maybe we don't need to think about Jon Stewart. But thank you again, Ms. Denise, and thank you to everyone. You all have a wonderful week and continue to eat this. I'm full, so I hope that this feeds you all for the rest of the week at least. And be blessed and take care.
See you in 15 minutes.
Good night.